So what we built at Plansight, I wouldn't call it an AI. I would call it an AI engine. We didn't build our own AI because we're not in the business of building AIs. And we add the word engine to sort of quantify what exactly is it that we've built. It's a collection of nodes that can be powered by AI, and some nodes don't require something as complicated as AI. Some nodes can just be a simple Boolean. Some nodes can be a simple regular expression. Some nodes can be a simple um, logic parse. It allows us to the engine allows us to basically use the right tool for the job at hand.
Welcome to Benefits Broker Boost, the show that gives employee benefits brokers practical strategies to grow, scale, and streamline their business. Presented by Plansight, where innovation meets efficiency in employee benefits. Now, let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of Benefits Broker Boost. I'm joined today by Brent Combs. Brent is a Plansight employee that's been here for several years and is the man behind the AI. He's one of our engineers that's built the AI that powers Plansight, and we're going to jump into all things AI today. Brent is someone that I'm really excited to have on. I like to tell people Brent has probably forgotten more about AI than most of us will ever know. So this could get really, really technical. We'll try to keep it high level so there's a good understanding. But Brent, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Adam. Wonderful intro. And it's just listening to it, it's amazing to hear somebody call me an AI expert because I never saw myself as that or tried to even become it. I love solving problems, and I've been like that since I was young. And so AI has offered me like this really cool way to solve problems that I've never had access to before. It's like a tool that's just so malleable and so useful. So I've just been a chronic user of it, and yeah, here I am talking about it. So
Yeah, I'm excited. Why don't you walk us through, Brent? I know this, but for anyone listening that doesn't know this, kind of walk us through the evolution of your career, because you've been in the benefits space for quite a while in different places. But walk us through where you started, problems that you saw, and now how you're solving those problems with the solutions that you're building.
yes, the origin story. So I graduated from Illinois State University. I'm a Redbird, and I'm Chicago based. I graduated with an economics degree, and I was really sure that I was going to go into like supply demand forecasting, maybe work for an oil and gas company, and I just couldn't find anything. And I threw an application at Country Financial, which is a property casualty insurance company, for a customer service role. And I thought, this way I can start to make some money and apply to jobs in between phone calls. I didn't really take the opportunity serious, but it was really quick. I spent 1 year out of school at Country Financial. And in that year, I became really interested in insurance. I had no idea I never thought about the human element of insurance. It's a promise on a piece of paper to protect humans in like the worst of times. And there's like a level of empathy in insurance that once you dive into, it becomes really interesting. So I went from just looking for other jobs to outside of insurance to looking for jobs inside of the insurance company. And, I really like math. Calculus was my favorite class in school. And I thought underwriting or actuary would be a really good place to move into and maybe help humans at scale by helping, improve loss ratios or, something like that. And Country Financial didn't find a place for me quick enough. I'm not known for being very patient. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, HCSC, had some opportunities to come and join their underwriting department. So I ended up moving away from Bloomington Normal up to the Chicagoland area and joining as a group insurance underwriter, underwriting everything but medical insurance, which is always ironic because when people hear Blue Cross Blue Shield, they think of medical insurance. But I underwrote life, disability, dental, vision, worksite, which includes critical illness, accident, hospital indemnity products for employer groups, which was a really interesting concept to me because not only now was I able to engage with the empathetic side of the insurance realm, but the entrepreneur side of it. So I'm helping not just humans, but small businesses, which is super cool. My family runs a small business, so I became super engaged with my work. And I just wanted to learn everything I possibly could. As I was working, I was really good at the job. I just had a knack for it, partly just because I wanted to do it. I wanted to be there. I wanted to understand it, but partly because it's so math driven. And I started to use the extra time I had around underwriting cases to work on tools to make underwriting better. I learned VBA code in my basement with one of my good friends, Martin Daniels. I started to write scripts that would help me underwrite at faster clips and get to more accurate pricing. And that side of underwriting became way more interesting to me over time. So I was with Blue Cross for about 4 years, just over 4 years, and I ended up moving on to ThreeFlow, to a small tech insurtech startup in Chicago. And my passion for just trying to make insurance technology sing is really what sort of pushed me out of my comfort zone at a job that I was really good at into a tiny tech startup like ThreeFlow. And I was really excited to join them at the time in 2019 because it just felt like there was just like this huge untapped opportunity to go out and build real solutions for tons of problem sets within the insurance domain. I didn't see a lot of people doing it at the time. So it felt like a blue sky, green field sort of opportunity for me. And I worked there for a few years and learned not just how to build technology, but how to build a company. And I got to work closely around the founders and founding employees, wear tons of different hats throughout my time there. And it really solidified for me that what I want to do is I want to solve problems for humans that unlocks, value in a way that gets people spending more time with their friends and family. So removing data entry from workflows is one way we can do that. Increases just a general value in society. So we're spending less on insurance premiums. Our claims are being approved at higher amounts and higher frequency because that all feeds back into the family loop too. And so the insurance domain ended up just being sort of like this perfect canvas to go out with that mission set, because there's just so much opportunity. There's so much data entry being done within the industry. There's so much time spent, and there's so much impact from all that work being done on everybody's lives in the country. And there's just so few people out there trying to solve the many problems. So it's been a wild ride. I departed from ThreeFlow in 2023, I believe, and joined Plansight, where I've been really just sort of focused on taking everything that I've gathered from, those first few phone calls at Country Financial, just getting an understanding of what insurance even is at a deeper level than just being a paying customer, to building helping build a company from the ground up at ThreeFlow. All the lessons learned, all the domain knowledge gathered. How do I solve, some of these problems in the most effective and the best way possible? So Plansight offered me an opportunity to do that. They gave me a lot of real estate to run and to try things that are very novel. So I swing for home runs, and Plansight's been a really fun place to do that at. And I'll pause there because I think we can get into some of the more specifics of everything that I've been going on with that. But that basically brings us up to where we're at today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. We're glad that you landed here, Brent. And I think I speak for everyone at Plansight, but also our customers. I hope people that are watching this understand from your career path, your passion for problem solving in this space. People that don't get to see the behind the scenes and what's underlying a lot of the technology that's built at Plansight may not understand that passion. But I think between you and Steve Overton, who's the founder here with 25 years of benefits experience, the passion to make Plansight as functional, seamless, and in-depth as possible is unmatched. It's, I've worked in a lot of tech companies, and you don't see that very often, that you have people that are sometimes good at problem solving, but rarely see a team that's as passionate and good at problem solving as what I've seen here. So appreciate you sharing that story. So let's shift a little bit into what we're actually doing with AI here. But sometimes when people hear AI, I think the first things that come to mind are the things that most people are familiar with. The general off-the-shelf ChatGPT and Claude chatbot interface, where I can ask it questions, it can bring me answers. And I think that part of equating AI to that can cause some concerns when it comes to what is this actually doing? How accurate is it? But walk us through the differences between kind of that general purpose chatbot interface, ChatGPT or Claude, and a purpose-built AI system like we've built here that's designed specifically for benefits quoting.
Sure. So to start, let's just talk about what is AI, artificial intelligence. And when we say that now, really what we're talking about is a consumer grade AI that was introduced through the advent of these large language models that were given a user interface around, ChatGPT 2.5 era that made it just easy for everybody to use. They had existed in one form or another for a long time before that. Some of the ancestors of ChatGPT, for example, date all the way back into the 90s. But it was the culmination of the models getting good enough and then the user interfaces getting easy enough for mass adoption to happen around 2022. And what that brought to us was the ability to start to kick the tires of AI and for more people to use it and to understand it and to eventually help train it and to make it a lot better. And so when you're dealing with one of these large language models, it's basically playing a big trick on you. It's just math, and it's making you, as they get better, it's making you feel like it's approaching more and more consciousness. I don't know if it is or not, to be honest. I'm an expert user. I've never actually made an AI myself. And so when we're talking about AI and AI chatbots, essentially what we're talking about is these large language models and being able to interact with them through a UI. So now what we're doing at Plansight, we don't need to necessarily give you a experience. That's not at least been the focus up front. And to compete with a frontier lab who has way more resources than us to build a cutting edge chat experience for you is going to be really difficult to compete with. But what we can do is we can go back to some of those industry problems that we're thinking about, that I've been thinking about for the last 10 years, and saying, with this new tool that I have, it's smart and it's getting smarter. Is there a way to deploy it in a way that starts to solve those problems for us? And the answer when we started to experiment was yes. But it introduces its own problem set that you have to control for and figure out as well. I like to think of using AI for specific tasks in sort of like 3 pillars. Is it accurate at doing the task? Is it consistent at doing that task? And is it able to do it efficiently? So fast and cheap. And when you can get all 3 of those pillars aligned for your tasks, you're in pretty good shape. And then the question becomes, how do I scale that now across like a production workflow where brokers across the country might engage with it? Are they going to also agree that it's accurate, consistent, fast and cheap? And that's where the trick comes in. So the easy and fast way to build that out is to just roll out some sort of chat that's going to be maybe accurate if you use a quality model, but it won't be consistent because, just like when you talk to humans, if you ask a human the same question multiple times across multiple days, their answers to you are going to drift. AIs are mimicking humans because they're trained on human text on the internet, so they're also going to drift for you. And instead of fighting that, just be aware of it. And then there's ways to think about the cost and the speed problem as well, which is the technical side of the equation that we don't have to dive into today. So what we built at Plansight, I wouldn't call it an AI. I would call it an AI engine. We didn't build our own AI because we're not in the business of building AIs. And we add the word engine to sort of quantify what exactly is it that we've built. Another word for it that I used to use that's sort of out of popularity right now is an intelligent automation system. So we give inputs into an engine or into an intelligent automation system. And then based on what those inputs are, we're going to send that around the system to various nodes that all have their own specific purpose to eventually get to an output. What does the user actually want based on the input that they gave us? And that's basically what the engine is. It's a collection of nodes that can be powered by AI, and some nodes don't require something as complicated as AI. Some nodes can just be a simple Boolean. Some nodes can be a simple regular expression. Some nodes can be a simple logic parse. So It allows us to the engine allows us to basically use the right tool for the job at hand. You put all that together and you have an engine that now you can deploy in various settings, and you can talk to your users and you can figure out what are the things that they have, what are the problems that they have, what are the needs that they have, what are the tangible pieces of evidence that represent those problems and needs, and then what do they want to get out of it. And then you can put that engine around your product to make that happen for them in theory. And various parts of the engine are powered by those AIs. And if you get under the hood in the moment of the AI running in that node of the engine, it'll look a lot like the chat experience you have every day with ChatGPT or Claude or what have you. But when you zoom out, it's a much bigger ecosystem than that. So
Yeah, that's a great explanation of what's happening behind the scenes. Sometimes I like to when people talk about hallucinations and the things that they're saying where they'll say, ask this question 5 times to ChatGPT or to Claude, and you'll get 5 slightly varying answers. I like to kind of make an analogy of, okay, this is trained on an immense amount of information all over the internet. It's digesting all of that information. It's giving you answers based on that. And what's on the internet changes on a daily basis. What it's finding changes on a daily basis. And so hallucinations make sense in that regard. It has, for one query, you look at the number of Google search results, you've got thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of answers to that one query. And these models are trying to make the right decision based off of those. As you start the prompt engineering process that you talked about, and you make it more and more specific, that's what we call like purpose-built AI. That's kind of like a buzzword that a lot of people use, a purpose-built AI. But as you get more and more specific, it takes that from trying to digest all of the information on the internet and give you the right answer to more of a mathematical equation. And that's kind of what you're describing here is
yeah,
this is the input, now do this, then do this. And then you come out with an output that's a lot more accurate and leaves far less drift. Not to say the drift won't happen, but then, an ambiguous, open-ended question, who's the best football player, right? You're going to get a lot of different answers on different days because that changes. So that's what this prompt engineering that you're talking about is doing. I like to make that comparison because I think it's gives you kind of the breadth of what AI can do and what AI can be used to do.
yeah,
So we've gotten to a point where, and we'll get into accuracy in a little bit. So we've gotten to a point where we have really good accuracy, but it's also not like, hey, just trust this AI fully, right? Like just let it run. We're not asking people to do that. Why don't you walk us through the actual workflow that we're putting in place to make sure that, hey, our AI is very accurate. Here's what it does. And then here's how we make sure that we're getting all of the right data out.
yeah. It's a good question. So I would say, I'm probably the least trusting person in the room. Almost always, I'm an underwriter. I'm going to give a little backstory, so hopefully that's okay. But one of the things I was known for at Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'm sure we can find managers and sales reps to attest to this, was I was really, really hard during the RFP process to work with. However, my results were impeccable. I had, stellar loss ratios. I had stellar close ratios with sales reps, because if you got through the process with me of me questioning all the content, asking questions about all the materials, about the employer group, about their enforced coverages, about their experience, about their claims history. If you filled in all those gaps with me, I could paint a really complete picture. So trust but verify, right? I learned that early on. And some people loved that about me and some people didn't want to work with me at all in those scenarios. And I never lost that. When, it was first introduced to me, the idea of instead of building an intelligent automation engine based off of deterministic machine learning models that I would have full control over. And I could tell you exactly in a black and white nature what the output would be based on a given set of circumstances. When I was first presented with the opportunity to pivot away from that model that we were building, to using this general purpose AI to go faster. I was the biggest detractor of that idea. I had to prove to myself that it was possible. And I'm still that way to this day as I work on it. So my assumption is like I have a default of it doesn't work, it's not accurate, it's not consistent, it's expensive, and it's slow. And then I have to prove out to myself every single day of working on it that I'm wrong about that. And I take that very serious because I'm the closest one to it, the build process. And so like if I trick myself, then we're all going to get tricked. And so I built a system, not just the AI engine itself around that philosophy of it's wrong, make it right, but also the process that we take from the build process of the technology to the evaluation of the technology. And if I go through all that, then I feel really comfortable turning around and offering it to the professionals that I left this profession of underwriting to come make technology, to not put my stamp of approval on the technology. I have to be able to put my stamp of approval on the technology to go back to those professionals and say, here, use this, I would. Mm-hmm. And so we have several ways that we achieve accuracy and consistency in a way that we feel is production ready, even for the toughest critics like myself, and I'm sure carriers and brokers out there that haven't tried it yet. So we know that the model is going to be probabilistic because that's how it's built. That's what it wants to do. And we should be okay with that because it's actually not that different than what we already allow from fellow humans. Like I had said, we're also probabilistic ourselves. So once we know that and we accept it, then we ask ourselves, how do we control for that, right? And so we have the intelligent automation that I described. We have many checks along the way to help lead to a deterministic output. Then the prompts that we give, you said purpose-built AI, and you quantified purpose as a buzzword, and it is in many circles used as a buzzword, but it also, there's some truth to it. So a general purpose AI chatbot like ChatGPT has to be able to just go wherever you want to go that day. A purpose-built AI engine like Plansight only has to go down a certain road. And the more specific we can be about the road that we're going to go down with that, the more we can dial in that consistency and that accuracy, because we can eliminate all the other noise that is going to exist. So we can make the world that when we are interacting with the AI, we can make its world view very small and very informed. We could say, I know that you know about quantum physics and calculus, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're just going to talk about life insurance. We can scope that model's context window down greatly. And then once it's scoped down, we can give it as much subject matter expertise that we have in-house at Plansight as we need. And it's not just our subject matter expertise, it's the subject matter expertise of our entire ecosystem, all of our brokers and carrier partners. And we have a lot of data that we can pull from and to give it access to that then allows it to be as well informed as any of us in the room about that knowledge. So we can give it a very specific problem to solve. If I'm an underwriter and you ask me, what is the life insurance benefit for this group? It's a pretty broad question. I could go any sorts of ways with it. I could just tell you about the death benefit. I could tell you maybe the death benefit plus the age reduction schedule. You're really leaving it up to me in that moment. How much energy do I have? How frustrated am I? Whatever. But if you give me a very specific task, like what is the death benefit in this life insurance plan document? It's much more specific. Then if you give me additional quantifications, like what is the life insurance death benefit in this document for this employer group, for this plan, for this class, and I want you to round to this specific decimal. All of a sudden, I have to go way out of my way. I have to spend a lot more effort giving you something you don't want than giving you exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. So we have systems like that in place to basically walk the AI the same way we would walk a human, by the way, towards the answer that we're trying to provide at the output of the interaction. And then once we have all that in place, we need to be able to check that through time and very widely. So we have a huge sample set of input outputs, sources of truth of if this comes in, we want this to come out. If the user says this or provides this, we want this on the other side of it. And we can run that evaluation through time to see not just how accurate are we being, but how consistent are we being across different scenarios and across different moments in time. And when those numbers are high, when we're highly accurate, when we see little drift, when we see costs that are effective for us and our customers to offer the service, and we see speeds that are going to keep the customer engaged at their desk, getting their work done, and it doesn't feel like they could do it sooner, we feel like we really hit a magic moment with that AI engine.
Yeah, that's so. So let's talk about the accuracy really quick. The accuracy is measured all sorts of different ways across AI. As I look at the way that you measure it, and I talk to other people that are developing in the AI space, I would say we're probably among the most stringent the way that we measure accuracy. But walk us through how you're measuring accuracy and what our accuracy currently looks like, and then I'll follow that up with another question. Just because people will say, well, there is error in there, right? There is. So yeah, walk us through that, how you're calculating that and what Plansight's accuracy looks like.
Yeah, the first thing I would stress test if I was an outsider, looking into the solution with Plansight or any other solution around the space is, are you even measuring it? I think that's something that we do really well here. We measure accuracy very unambiguously. Part of that is just like I just sort of told you about it, just I don't trust it myself. And so I'm forcing myself to get all the evidence I need to then build up that trust profile. And so I would ask to not just, it's one thing to be told the numbers, I'm 90% accurate, I'm 95% accurate, but any good statistician will tell you that they can make a stat up about anything to say anything that they want. You just, sort of play around the edges of how you're going to pull that data through. So the first thing is to actually show me how you're actually evaluating your accuracy as a first basis point. What we do is we create golden sources of truth. So if a customer gives us input A, we can say we want output A. And output A will be the exact shape and size that would require 0 edits from that user. And so to get a 100% score on a single accuracy evaluation through our system, the user simply uploads a document or enters a request, and then we provide a zero-touch data entry response back to them. If we get one value incorrect, we lose a point in that accuracy equation. And it has to be not just on a content level. So let's say life insurance death benefit, the value might be 10,000, but there's many ways to say 10,000. You can say it with or without a decimal. You can say it with or without a dollar sign. You could write the word 10,000. There's lots of ways to get to that. So not only does it have to be right on a content level, the way we grade, but it also has to be right in the way that the user actually wants to normalize that into their system of record or wherever that output is going. If it's going to a presentation, if it's going to a proposal, if it's going to a certificate or a summary, wherever it might be going downstream from that interaction. So our bar to get that accuracy point, that credit for that accuracy point is extremely high. Another thing we do is we don't just grade ourselves on the accuracy, but we grade ourselves on the shape of the output. So if you give me a plan design document and you say, I want to enter the plan design from this document into my system of record, and I don't want to do the data entry. Many systems, or even ours included, might be able to get the information for one plan. But how do you perform when there's 3 plans? How do you perform when there's 3 plans and 2 classes for each plan? How do you perform when there's 3 plans? One plan has 2 classes, one plan has 5 classes, one plan is an optional plan that never got offered. I mean, it can get very, very complicated and weedy in the world of insurance. So we also grade ourselves on that element of, are we getting the correct values normalized exactly how you want them, but are we also getting you the correct shape? Are we getting you all the plans, classes, networks that you would actually care about inside of that document and organizing it all correctly? Mm-hmm. And we're extremely punitive on ourselves when we mess up the shape. When we mess up the shape, we give ourselves 0, even if many of those plans had correct values inside of them. So we could have a multi-plan document, and there's 4 plans, and 3 plans we got 100% accurate on, and then 1 plan we didn't find and didn't provide you, and we actually give ourselves a complete 0 grade on that. We're very punitive because we know if we mess up the shape, then even if you see correct values elsewhere in the system, because you're missing that plan, it just feels completely off. It feels completely wrong. So I would be surprised to find solutions that are as complete at getting that correct shape profile out of documents or requests from users, let alone being able to evaluate themselves as rigorously as we do on that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And I think that's a really, really important clarification to make. So you mentioned any statistician can get you to the right percentage accuracy given the right parameters. I could load a single plan document into a system and know that I'm going to upload 15 single plan documents and have it get those accurate that are pretty easy documents for it to process, and get 100% on that and say, across 300 data points, 100% accuracy, right? That's the type of thing when someone says we're 100% accurate with AI, that's the way that they're skewing those numbers. And you have to understand how they're making those grades, and the fact that when the shape of a plan does not meet what the shape of a plan should be, we're getting a 0. You could be 90% accurate on that plan, but because the shape is wrong, you get a 0, and that brings your accuracy down. Based on our last runs of our accuracy, where are we sitting at, given those parameters right now?
Yeah, I'll pull up my eval log, and while I do, I just want to add to that a little bit. And like another way, like an example of ways, stats can sort of be used in many different ways and be, sort of shaped by the provider. I think the way that we grade, and I do this on purpose, is we're the toughest critic. So if I know that I can shape and I can bias the stats that I'm going to provide to myself, first and foremost, I don't want to lie to myself, but then also the internal team at Plansight, and then most importantly, the users of it, I want to be the most aggressively punitive on those stats. If I say that I'm 90% accurate on a document or a specific request from a user, the way that I'm grading myself, the user should think that it's 90% or better. So an example of that playing out is if many users may not care if I'm rounding the death benefit correctly. Maybe they just don't go to that level of detail. They're going through a lot of volume, and they're just 10,000 rounded to the nearest decimal point, or 10,000 rounded to the nearest thousandth point feels the same to them, and they're not thinking it. So, I'm looking for ways that I can be the most conservative in the way that I'm evaluating my accuracy, and then I attune to that, right? The primary use case of our AI engine right now is data extraction, normalization, and entry. We want Plansight to feel like magic for its users. And the biggest, most magical moment for a user right now in the insurance technology space is having a platform that doesn't require a ton of data entry. It just doesn't exist. Everywhere they look, there's integrations, but everywhere they look, there's just data entry to be done, whether it's on a spreadsheet or another platform or what have you. And there's data integrity issues with all that data input. And so it's really important to me that Plansight, when you unlock that for your broker, your users very quickly feel like it's not adding to that data entry liability. And so what I want to give everybody is a way to do all the data entry for insurance plan design just by providing a document that represents it well. Just upload it there. And it's good to do the upload because then it's in your system of record and you can show everybody where the data entry is coming from. You reference it later. A lot of the actions you're going to take downstream, like going to market or trying to renew or analyze experience, is all going to need a reference back to that document anyways. So it's a good habit to do. It's a task that should be done. And if you do it, then can I facilitate all of the data entry around the plan design and rates that would be required from that document existing in the first place? And so that's the major use case that I'm grading on. And that's sort of what these accuracy numbers will be around. And we look at accuracy on a product level. So how well do we do? Because that's the major axis of the difficulty of the content that exists within. And so we look at our engine and we see how well is it doing data extraction, normalization, and entry for users on a medical product type, on a dental product type, on a vision product type, etc. So let's run through those. On average, our accuracy score across all product types that we support is currently at 9109.
Nice.
Okay, and that's on a sample set of 513 source documents. And that source document corpus set is constantly growing. And the same way that I'm very conservative on how I do my analysis on that sample set, as I add documents to it, it started out as a randomly selected document set 2 years ago. The way that it got to 513 today is every time somebody reports to me a document that's challenging or is not working well in the system, whether it's an internal user or a customer telling me this document just doesn't work well for us with the AI, that's the document that I pull in. So the document set is constantly and chronically getting more difficult and more complicated and showing me more and more edge cases throughout time. So we're getting better. So we're 91.09% accurate on the most difficult documents that I can find in the insurance industry. The shape of those documents, those plans in those documents, I also sort of keep score of that. And so our current, we're currently 95% accurate on the shape estimate. That means that 95% of the time we're identifying the correct product types inside of the document. We're identifying the correct plan structure. So is it a single plan or multi-plan for that product type? We're identifying the correct network structure for each of those plans. So you could have a medical plan with a gold PPO and a silver PPO, and maybe the network structure for gold and silver is different.
Mm-hmm.
And then classes. So all of that can also then be based on, executive class or hour class and et cetera. So that's the shape profile we look at. 91.09% accurate on just the ultimate values that we're describing, being the correct content, normalized in the way that our users would not have to interact with it on the way that we want to normalize our values.
Mm-hmm.
And then 95% of the time, we're getting you the correct shape out of that on the broad basis. So do you want me to stop there, or do you want to go through each of the product
let's
types?
stop there. So I hope that anyone that's listening understands the scrutiny that Brent puts on the product that he's building. To have that type of accuracy with the previously problematic documents, with the 0 score when it misses shape, with the rounding errors. This is phenomenal. I've run a lot of documents through this in doing demos, in showing the product capabilities to prospects, to friends, and have yet to see one that I've put through come out inaccurate. Now, it will happen, and it will happen with any AI because we're training the model, and hopefully that it gets better and better. Let's talk through, Brent, what we've built in the product so that when you have your document here and everything that gets pulled out here, how they can go through and QA that. And I know that's going to be changing here in the next couple of days. So let's go through what that's going to look like. It will be live before this episode gets published.
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk through
Annotations.
that. Yes. So we can talk through that where, this is not, like I said, this is not, hey, we're 91 to 95% accurate here. Just let it run. We're going to pull all that data out and we're going to make it really easy for you to QA where that came from. So run us through what that looks like now, Brent.
Yeah, I think this is more important actually than anything, the AI engine itself. However, the AI engine we have is what unlocked this ability to offer this feature set. So it's the chicken and the egg scenario. But this is actually, I think, the most exciting feature that Plansight's rolled out since I've been here. If you think about it, even in a world where my AI engine is 100% accurate, 100% consistent, and whatever, how long is it going to take every user in the industry to agree with that? Yeah. And even if I can say we're 100% accurate, 100% normalized, et cetera, there's always going to be difference in taste and preference. When we say we're going to round a death benefit to the nearest thousandth place, that's because a majority of our brokers want it to be normalized in that fashion. But who's to say, that some people don't want to do it that way? And so what we need to offer, even in a world where we have completely perfect accuracy, is a way for people to QA and learn to trust but verify the same way that I've been doing throughout this entire process, the quality of the AI engine itself, and then also be able to influence their own tastes and preference into the final result in a way that doesn't feel slow or redundant or repetitive or a slog. Otherwise, I'm not living up to the whole reason why I joined this thing, this space of insurtech in 2019. So we're rolling out a feature called Annotations, and it's super cool. What it does is it gives us a breadcrumb trail through the documents that you're uploading so that you can see from the final normalized value that we're entering into the system of record for you to where that information was housed in the document. So now the QA process should look like, well, the whole process end to end should look like you upload a document, you see the plan design from that document entered into the system of record on your behalf. And as you look through that, because this has never been about taking the human out of the loop, it's been improving the value and the life of the human that's in the loop. And so as you scroll through those values that are being extracted from the document, it's as simple as clicking on the value to then go see where in the document we would have sourced it from. This is something that I would need if I was a carrier user. I would need to use this feature quite frequently, and because I don't trust anybody else except for my own eyes, and I want to see the source document. And I think a lot of my users out there in the industry are going to feel the same way for a long time. So it brings that, now we have a magic moment of I'm doing less or maybe no data entry to not doing the data entry, and I'm also very efficiently validating that the data entry is accurate, and then also according to my preference, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Let me paint this picture for people that haven't used Plansight yet. You either upload a document or you get a document back from a carrier. It pulls into our system. So you've got, here's your plan document. And then within seconds, what are we talking, Brent? Like, depending on the document, between 30 seconds and, a minute and 30 seconds at the longest.
Yeah, on average, everything processes well under a minute. I don't have the average times in front of me, but it's definitely around like 20 to 30 seconds.
It's fast. You'll be shocked. So plan document comes in, AI pulls everything out. So you've got it side by side in a screen. Here's all of the data that it's been pulled out in cells. And it says, your maximum out of pocket is this. Right now, if you hover over that and click on it, it will scroll this document to exactly where it found that from. So your QA is click. Yep, that matches. Click. Yep, that matches. And as Brent is saying, that's the way that we want to see it as well. You can change it very easily. But now the process of data extraction in QA is minutes for even complex documents. It's click, click, click. You're just making sure that it matches and you're done. And everything has been already pulled out for you. So it's really amazing the point that it's getting to. And it's really something that you've got to see how fast it can do it, because like Brent said, most everything is processing under a minute. A lot of things in 30 seconds or less. It's there, and now your QA of that is very, very easy. And that's where all of this is starting to come together. Brent, your baby is coming together, and that's why you're so excited about the annotations. Is your accuracy score is phenomenal, and it's grading on really hard scales and still scoring far better than most AI accuracy scores. So you're using this scale that I'm confident almost no one else is using. And it purposefully takes the edge cases, the harder things to do, and gives us still 90% plus accuracy on all of those things. Now it pulls all of that out automatically, and we're not just saying, hey, trust it. It's, hey, now run through it really quickly, do a quick QA. And we made that so easy, way easier to QA than anything else. And you're probably already doing this already. The listeners are, right? You have someone that's pulling all the information. If you're doing it manually, someone that's pulling it all out, they're spreading it. And then probably someone else that's QAing that if you've got the right pieces in place to make sure that, because humans will still make mistakes when they're pulling data out and putting data in. So you've just taken that process from two people potentially an hour worth of work, maybe faster if you're really good at it and it's a document you're really used to, down to just a few minutes, and you've got the same scrutiny on it. You've got someone QAing it, you've got something that's really accurate pulling it out, and it's saving teams. When we ran the data on this, we're very, very confident in saying this will save your marketing team 40% of the time. And this is very, very conservative. Like I said, 40% of the time that was required to do all of this manual spreadsheeting. And Brent, this is all thanks to, that scrutiny that you put on yourself and that scrutiny that you judge all these things by, making this as fast as it can be and making this as consistent as it can be. So it's something that a lot of Plansight users have really come to love and to trust. It's one of the features that we hear the most feedback about. I mean, it's only one of the features inside of the set of the full scope of what Plansight can do, but we are running up on time. We could probably go on. We could make this a Joe Rogan style podcast and probably go for 2 hours. But I think this has been really, really helpful for people that are asking themselves the questions of how can I trust AI in helping process plan documents? How can I trust AI in this RFP process? And helping them see just how it kind of fits in and how we're still not taking the human out of that. We're keeping human in the loop, and now we're making that even easier for the human that is in the loop and saving teams hours and hours for every RFP they're doing.
Totally.
So, Brent, I appreciate your time. I think it's clear to anyone that's watched this, the way that your brain works and how methodically you're thinking about things and how calculated you are. You mentioned, your favorite class was calculus. It's pretty easy to see, even as you're answering these questions, the way that your brain kind of works in that mathematical formula. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. I do have one question that I love asking people, and I think it'll look a little different for you. I usually ask this to brokers that are on the podcast, but when you look at the industry and how it's adapted and how it's currently adopting technology, what are the things that you think will be changing in the industry over the next 2 to 3 years? And I know this is impossible to say specifically, but what do you see happening in the industry over the next 2 to 3 years? And where do you see the differentiators between those who adopt and implement technology quickly and those who wait till the majority of the industry is adopting it?
Yeah, I see a lot less data entry because you can apply the way that we've built our engine to anywhere you find data entry you don't want to be doing. You just change the shape of our engine a little bit and you can alleviate that. So I know at least the good folks at Plansight can make a huge dent in eliminating human-driven data entry from view for the industry. What does that do, though? It opens up a lot more time for us all to spend on the knowledge work. And I think that means that it's up to all of us to figure out with that extra time to do the knowledge work, whether I'm, a benefit consultant or, a data entry clerk or a producer or a carrier underwriter or an actuary. If I'm not doing the more menial tasks anymore, what am I going to solve next? What's the next problem? What's the knowledge work problem that I'm going to solve? And to figure that out, it's just find your mission in your career, like I have, and chase that thing relentlessly. So don't turn in early because you have less work to do because of AI, but lean into your passion of why am I showing up in the first place? It's easy to lose sight of that after years and years and years of getting beaten down, of just trying to keep your head above water, and moving from task to task to task. But as you start to get that additional room to breathe, find your passion, chase that thing. And I think that's going to lead to better outcomes for the industry. But because the insurance industry is so impactful to society, it's going to lead to a better result for society. So whether that's trying to improve loss ratios so premiums stop going up every year, or make claims adjudication faster and simpler, whatever it is that you want to attack aggressively to solve for and to bring about, a meaningful difference in everybody's lives, go after and do that thing. And that's what I really hope. That's, I think, the optimistic read of, what AI is unlocking within the insurance tech space is it's unlocking human time. And then human time plus creativity is usually going to lead to beautiful things. So that's what I'm really excited for. And I think if you don't adopt the sort of like the newest and best tools at your disposal, unfortunately, you just sort of get left behind. And I feel bad because you spend time doing things that I don't think are a life that well lived. I don't get me wrong, like I love the craft of perfectly entered data, but that's not the craft that you should do 24/7, 365. And it's real easy for you to feel underwater and under-resourced and stressed out. And it's going to lead into personal, life. And it's not going to be the ideal scenario. So if you just explore some of these newer tools and solutions, whether it's Plansight or whatever, and just find the best way to solve the problems with the tools that are available to you today, I think that's a really, like, it's going to lead to like a job well done, a job better, like done better, more free time, pivots into, more interesting problems and solutions that get solved for. And then you just end up leaving work with a smile on your face because you felt like you did something unique and personal, and then it might show up in your life and your family's life and your neighbor's life, and that's a really cool thing to work towards. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. There's a lot that I could say about that. We'll just leave that as a mic drop, though, because I think you said it all, Brent.
Okay.
Appreciate everyone for joining in. I hope you've learned a little bit about what's driving Plansight, what you can see inside of Plansight. If you haven't seen it personally, reach out, request a demo. We're happy to show you exactly how it works. Let it process some of your documents so you can actually see that in real time. But the main thing that I hope everyone got out of this is one of the last things that Brent said. As AI, we get asked quite often, what's the ROI on Plansight? And that's we can quantify time savings on Plansight, definitely, and we have, and we're happy to share that with anyone. But the ROI, the true ROI, is what do I do with the time that I saved? And so we can't actually quantify most people's ROI because, like Brent said, if you've got this mission that you're going to accomplish, freeing up that time, your ROI could be 300x. If that unlocks you being able to do more of what's really your mission, and you are able to do that with the time saved, it's really hard for us to quantify total ROI because it really depends on if you know what you're going to do with time saved for your team. So that is what I would hope that people's takeaway is as you adopt technology, and especially AI that's taking these menial tasks off of your plate, make sure that you know where you're going with that time. And if it is time saved and you just want to spend more time with your family, if you're at the tail end of your career, great. That's your mission there. But also, if you're just starting your career and you're looking to make a big impact somewhere, make sure you know what the next step is when you unlock that time savings so that you get the most out of it. And I appreciate the way you articulated that, Brent. But like I would say, thank you for watching. Thanks for spending some time with us, and be better tomorrow than you were today.